When you've lived beside someone for 8 years, sharing a bed, a home, a life, you begin to see past what's spoken, and what's hidden behind silence is often louder than words. So when Jonathan stopped asking if I'd be home for dinner, when his hand no longer brushed against mine on the couch, when the scent of lavender shampoo wasn't met with even a glance, I didn't need confirmation. I already knew. I still played the part. Made coffee at 7:15 sharp, pressed his suits, folded his ties, smiled when he came home late. That's what wives do, right? Except I wasn't a wife. Not on paper. Not by ring. We'd been engaged for 4 years. Or so he told the world. In reality, there was no wedding date.
No planner. No registry. No dress.
Only excuses. First they made sense. The business expansion. His father's health. The pandemic. Timing. Logistics. Delays. Eventually the excuses ran out. But I stayed. Because when you invest years into someone, you start convincing yourself that loyalty is love. Even if you're the only one still being loyal. The day I found out was ordinary. I was at the flower shop. The same one we used to visit every Sunday. I'd stopped going with him years ago. He was always too tired. So I went alone, picked up hydrangeas and chatted with the florist. That's when I heard it. 2 girls beside me were whispering excitedly. One of them clutched her phone. Screen lit up with a ring photo. Did you see? Mr. Blake proposed to his secretary. Right in the office. My heart skipped. Blake? There must be dozens in this city. It wasn't him. Except the next thing I heard. It's all over the company forum. The secretary's name is Clara. You know, the tall one with the red lipstick. My fingers turned cold around the bouquet. Clara. Jonathan's assistant. The one who always called him by his first name. The one whose messages I once found on his tablet. Hidden but not deleted. She said yes, of course. The girl giggled. I mean, who wouldn't? The CEO is finally off the market. My mouth went dry. 8 years of devotion. 4 years of waiting. And he put a ring on her finger. Before ever asking me to wear his last name. That night I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't throw a single vase. I sat at our dinner table, my chair neatly pushed in, the food untouched. When Jonathan came home, he acted like nothing had happened. Loosened his tie. Kissed my forehead. Asked, "Long day?" I looked at him. Really looked. And finally saw a man who was never mine. So I smiled. And said quietly, "No longer than yours." I imagine proposals are exhausting. He froze. And in that instant I watched his face crumble. Jonathan didn't answer right away. He stood by the door like he'd just been caught in a crime he hadn't finished planning. I returned my gaze to the hydrangeas, now wilting on the table. Fitting. You heard, he finally asked, voice low. I nodded.
No hysteria.
No fire. Just cold air between us. It's true, he said, like confession might soften the blow. But I didn't mean for it to come out like this. How did you mean for it to come out? I asked. At our non-existent wedding reception? He winced. I stood up, calmly picked up the flowers and placed them in the trash. I was going to tell you, he said quickly. Soon. Clara, it just happened. It didn't just happen, I said. You've been planning this. The office proposal, the ring, the performance. You rehearsed your new future while I was still washing your dishes. He looked down at the floor. You're right. I waited for more, maybe regret, maybe shame, but nothing came. Only silence. So I nodded. Then we're done. He blinked. What? I said we're done. You've proposed to someone else, Jonathan. There's no us left to salvage. I thought you'd be angry, he muttered. I thought you'd scream. Or cry. Or beg. Is that what you were hoping for? No, he said quickly. I didn't think you'd leave so easily. I let out a laugh, short, humorless. Easily. I stepped closer. I gave you 8 years. You gave me silence. And now you think walking away is easy. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew better. I moved past him and into our shared closet. Pulled out a suitcase. Started packing. He watched in stunned stillness. You're really going? Yes. Where? I paused. Anywhere that doesn't require pretending. That night, I checked into a hotel across town. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on the bed and stared at my phone. The same background photo still glowed on the screen. Me and Jonathan, smiling in Santorini. I deleted it. One tap. Gone. Then, almost on instinct, I opened my email. There it was. An invitation. From Ethan Choi. Ethan had once been just a friend. A quiet constant. We met at a networking event 6 years ago. Shared a drink. A joke. Few emails. Nothing ever happened. But he always replied. His message was simple. I heard what happened. If you need a break from the city, I'll be in town this week. Coffee. I stared at the screen. He didn't ask for explanations. Didn't probe. Just offered warmth. Just offered space. I replied. Tomorrow. Noon. I didn't know what I expected from that meeting. I just knew I'd spent too long waiting for a ring that never came. And now that it had, on someone else's hand, I finally felt free enough to say goodbye. Ethan looked exactly the same. Polished, calm, effortlessly present. We met at a small cafe tucked between two bookstores. The kind of place you only find when you're not looking. I arrived early. Nerves maybe. Or maybe because I didn't want to see Jonathan walking anywhere nearby. When Ethan stepped in, he spotted me instantly.
No hesitaste.
No pretending he hadn't seen me. Just a soft smile and an easy walk to my table. Hey, he said, sitting down. It was quiet for a second. Then he pushed a cup toward me. Chai latte. Almond milk. 2 pumps of vanilla. I blinked. You remember my order? He gave a sheepish grin. I remember people who matter. It hit me harder than I expected. 8 years with Jonathan, and I couldn't recall the last time he brought me coffee, let alone remembered how I took it. We talked. Not about the proposal. Not yet. He told me about his new art gallery in Kyoto. About his goddaughter's piano recital. About the rainstorm he got caught in last week. And somehow it made everything feel normal. Like I wasn't standing in the rubble of a life someone else had demolished. Eventually I told him. Not the full story. Just enough. He didn't flinch. Didn't judge. Didn't say, I told you so, even though he easily could have. Instead he nodded slowly. Then it's his loss. But you already knew that. I looked at him. What if it's my loss too? I asked. What if I wasted all my good years waiting for someone who never saw me? Ethan leaned in, elbows on the table. Then you have even better years ahead. With no one else's name on them. It wasn't a romantic line. It wasn't a promise. It was a truth I hadn't let myself believe. We walked through a nearby park afterward. The leaves had started turning. A soft gold drifted through the breeze. Ethan paused under a tree. I know this is probably too soon, he said. But I'm leaving next week. Kyoto's calling. I nodded. But before I go, there's a charity gala. Friday night. Dinner, music, dancing. Normal stuff. Come with me. He didn't ask for anything more than my presence. Not answers. Not emotional baggage. Not a fresh wound to fix. Just my company. I smiled. I'd like that. And for the first time in weeks, I looked forward to something. That had nothing to do with Jonathan. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror for longer than I'd planned. The dress was new. Deep emerald silk. Not red, Jonathan's favorite. Not beige, his secretary's shade. This one was mine. I tied my hair up loosely, letting soft strands fall. My makeup was subtle. My heels quiet. There was no costume. No mask. For once, I dressed not to impress, but to feel like myself. When I stepped out of the hotel lobby, Ethan was already waiting in a charcoal suit, leaning against a black sedan. He didn't whistle. Didn't over-compliment. He just said, "You look settled." And somehow that meant more. The gala was beautiful. Glass chandeliers. Jazz trio. Waiters moving like dancers. But it wasn't the sparkle that mattered. It was the way Ethan held the small of my back when we walked. The way he introduced me by my full name. No title. No attachment to anyone else. Just me. He wasn't trying to show me off. He was making space for me to belong. Later, while we sat under the balcony watching the lights shift against the glass ceiling, He asked quietly. Did you ever imagine your life differently? All the time, I said. He looked at me. Do you still? I paused. I don't know what I want next. Only that it won't look anything like what I left behind. He nodded. That's more than enough. Halfway through the evening, a hand tapped my shoulder. I turned. My stomach dropped. Jonathan. Of course he would be here. He was on the board of one of the charity sponsors. This was his world too. He looked shocked to see me. More shocked to see me with Ethan. His eyes narrowed. Didn't expect to see you here. I smiled calmly. You're not the only one with invitations. He looked at Ethan, jaw tight. You too? Ethan held my hand lightly. We're enjoying the evening. That's all. Jonathan's gaze shifted back to me. You're really doing this? You proposed to your secretary, I said. This is me following your example. He laughed once bitterly. So it's revenge now? No, I said softly. This is clarity. He said nothing. But I could see it in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to rise. To show up glowing. To look like someone who had already closed the chapter he was still trying to control. I turned back to Ethan. Let's go dance. And just like that I walked away. Not from a man. But from the version of me that once waited for one. 2 days after the gala, a package arrived at the hotel. No sender name, but I knew who it was from. The handwriting was too careful to be casual. Inside the box was the ring. The one Jonathan had once bought, just to show me he was serious. It had stayed hidden for years, always not the right time to propose. Now it sat quietly in velvet, accompanied by a single card. I made a mistake. Let's talk before you do something impulsive. I stared at the words. Talk? After 8 years of being unheard? Now he wanted a conversation? I placed the box on the nightstand untouched. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking through a quiet art museum downtown. Not because I was looking for beauty, but because I needed stillness. I wandered through the exhibits until I found Ethan standing in front of a canvas. Bold colors, soft edges. I thought I might find you here, he said without turning. I joined him in silence. After a moment he glanced sideways. You've been quiet. I got a ring in the mail, I said flatly. His expression didn't change. From him. I nodded. He said he wants to talk. And do you? I thought about it. I thought about the meals I made that went cold. The anniversaries I spent alone. The nights I waited on the couch until 2 a.m. just to hear the door unlock. No, iwisparat. I just want closure. Ethan nodded once. Then give him what he asked for. But make sure the door you close doesn't have a window. I texted Jonathan. Told him I'd meet him at the Garden Cafe. The one we used to go to when things were still light. He arrived 10 minutes early.
No suit. No tie.
Just a plain shirt and tired eyes. He didn't speak right away. Just sat down and placed a folder on the table. What's that? I asked. Our joint accounts. Your share of the condo. A few stocks I put under your name. I figured you'd want to sever everything officially. I raised an eyebrow. You're giving me money? I'm giving you what's yours. Sounded noble. But I didn't flinch. Is this about guilt? He didn't answer. Just looked at me with something resembling shame. I proposed to Clara because I thought you'd never leave, he admitted. You'd waited so long, I figured you'd just keep waiting. And you were okay with that? No, he whispered. But I was selfish enough not to care. I picked up the ring box from my purse and placed it in front of him. I don't need this. Celine, I needed you to choose me when no one was watching. Not now. Not like this. He looked away. I stood. This isn't about revenge. It's about realizing I spent years being afraid to walk away, when I should have been running. And then I left. Not with tears. Not with drama. Just a deep exhale. And the weight of a ring I'd never worn finally lifted from my hand. A week passed. Then 2. And just like that, Jonathan's wedding was announced. It was quiet. No press, no social media noise. Just a few photos leaked from someone's story. A simple garden ceremony. White roses. Guests in pastel. Clara wore a sleeveless gown and a smug smile. Jonathan looked tired. His face was composed but not proud, like someone who'd finished a task, not begun a life. I saw the photo while sipping tea at the rooftop lounge of Ethan's hotel. He hadn't asked about Jonathan in days, but when I showed him the phone, he simply nodded. Closure looks different for everyone, he said. I placed the phone face down. Apparently, his version comes with vows. And yours? He asked gently. I looked out at the city, at the skyline I used to feel trapped beneath, at the horizon that finally looked open. My version comes with peace. That evening, Ethan brought me to a quiet dinner.
No sweets. No ballroom.
Just candlelight and the sound of slow jazz in the background. After the waiter poured our wine, he reached into his pocket. My heart stopped for a second, but instead of a ring, he pulled out a folded envelope. I'm flying back to Kyoto next week, he said. But before I go, I want you to see this. Inside the envelope was a one-way ticket. To Kyoto. Under my name. I stared at it. This isn't pressure, he said quickly. You don't owe me anything. But if you want a change, a real one, this is a door you can walk through. My throat tightened. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said. But it's worth it. I stared at the ticket, then at him. Why me? He smiled. Because when you were still invisible to someone else, you looked me in the eye like I mattered. I exhaled. 4 years I dreamed of wedding dresses, of rings, of a name that matched mine. And here was a man offering no ring, no vows. Just a seat beside him in a life he hadn't built yet. It wasn't a proposal. It was an invitation. And somehow that meant more. I didn't say yes to Ethan right away. I didn't say no either. Instead, I walked through the city for hours. No destination. Just motion. Just breath. It had been a long time since I allowed myself space to simply exist without expectation. No one waiting for me.
No chores.
No half-empty wine glasses at a cold dinner table. Just me. When I passed by a small boutique window, something made me stop. A white dress. Not a wedding gown. Not elaborate or heavy. Just a simple linen dress with a square neckline and pearl buttons down the back. It looked soft. Uncomplicated. Free. I walked in. Tried it on. Fit. And in that dressing room, staring at a reflection I barely recognized, I asked myself a question I had never once dared to ask. What if I married myself first? That night I wore the dress. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Ethan. Not friends. Not family. I booked a private table at a quiet rooftop bistro overlooking the river. I ordered a glass of wine. Then dessert. And I toasted to the version of me who had waited. Endured. Folded. Compromised. She deserved to be honored. Not erased. When the waiter asked if I was expecting someone, I smiled. No, I said. Just celebrating a personal anniversary. He nodded with a soft grin. I hope they're worth it. They are, I replied. The next morning, I met Ethan in the hotel lobby. He didn't ask where I had been. But when I stepped into view wearing that same white dress, he looked at me like he finally saw what I had reclaimed. Good morning, he said gently. It is, I replied. I booked my flight. His eyes lit up. But he didn't rush. Didn't cheer. Just smiled and offered his hand. I took it. And for the first time in my life, it didn't feel like I was stepping into someone else's story. It felt like the prologue to my own. Airports have a strange energy. People crying, reuniting, saying goodbye. It's where endings and beginnings shake hands without ever speaking. I arrived early, suitcase in hand, white dress carefully packed inside. Passport. Ticket. A new name on the itinerary, Celine Blake. Not because I had taken his name, but because it was mine long before he tried to own it. I sipped coffee by the window when I saw him. Jonathan. Of course. It was poetic, really fate giving him a front row seat to the life I was choosing without him. He didn't rush toward me. He just stood across the gate, as if debating whether I was a mirage. Then he walked over. I didn't stand. Didn't panic. I simply looked up as he approached. You're leaving, he asked. I smiled. I already left. He swallowed hard. Why Kyoto? It's not about the place, I said. It's about the version of me that belongs there. He sat down across from me looking tired. Older. Clara and I. It's not what you think. I raised a brow. What do I think? That I married her to spite you. Did you? He looked away. I don't know anymore. We sat in silence for a few seconds. I saw the photos, he added. The gala. You looked different. I said softly. I am. He nodded slowly, then pulled something from his coat pocket. Another ring. Not the one I returned. A new one. Thinner. Simpler. I bought this before I even proposed to Clara, he admitted. I kept it. Just in case. I didn't touch it. I don't need it. He blinked. But why him? He asked. I looked out the window at the tarmac. The better question is, why not me? Why didn't you ever choose me when it mattered? He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not asking for answers. I don't need them anymore. He nodded slowly. Will you be happy? I smiled. I already am. He stood, pocketed the ring again, and before walking away, he whispered something I never expected. Thank you for leaving. It made me look in the mirror. I watched him disappear into the crowd, and when my flight number was called, I rose with a lightness that didn't need wings. Kyoto greeted me with gentle gray skies and the scent of rain on stone. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just still. Like the city was quietly holding its breath for whatever I'd do next. Ethan met me at the arrival gate.
No flowers.
No signs. Just him holding an umbrella. You made it, he said. I nodded. I did. He didn't ask about the flight. He didn't ask about Jonathan. He simply took my suitcase with one hand and reached for mine with the other. The apartment was small. A corner unit above a bakery. Sunlight filtered through sliding paper doors and made everything look warm. There was a desk, a teacup already waiting, and a single canvas leaning against the wall, half painted. I walked over to it. You started this? I asked. I was waiting to finish it, Ethan said behind me. For me. He smiled. No, for us. I didn't answer. Just sat on the floor, toes curled into the soft matting, and let myself breathe.
No deadlines.
No questions.
No titles.
For the first time in years, no one was expecting me to play a role. I was just Celine, and that was enough. Over the next few days, I melted into a rhythm. Early mornings. There. Walks by the Como River. Sketches in my notebook. Ethan never hovered. He simply shared space. Sometimes we'd paint side by side in silence. Sometimes he'd read aloud from poetry books. Soft, slow stanzas that felt like rain dripping into my bones. I didn't know if this was love. Not yet. But it was peace. And peace had always been the thing I thought I didn't deserve. One evening we sat on the rooftop as lanterns flickered across the city. Ethan poured wine into 2 small glasses and handed me one. To new beginnings, he said.
I lifted mina.
To the woman I had to lose to become this one. We clinked. And I didn't feel the need to explain what I meant, because he already understood. It had been 3 months since I arrived in Kyoto. The seasons shifted. The air turned cooler. Tourists came and went, but I stayed. And for once, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's story. One morning, I walked past a mirror in the hallway and did something strange. I stopped. Not to check my makeup. Not to fix my hair. But because the woman staring back didn't look like a survivor anymore. She looked whole. There were still cracks, of course there were. But they no longer made her weaker. They made her real. I smiled. She smiled back. That evening, Ethan and I cooked dinner together.
No ekachen.
No reason. Just 2 people peeling vegetables and dancing to old jazz on a tiny speaker. He wasn't rushing toward anything. And neither was I. After we ate, he stepped out to take a call. And I went to the studio corner. The half-finished canvas still sat there. I dipped my brush into deep blue. Not sadness. Depth. Then strokes of gold. Not pride. Light. I didn't know what I was painting. Only that it was honest. When Ethan returned, he stood behind me silently. That's new, he said softly. I nodded. I didn't want to paint anything I didn't live first. He placed his hand gently on my shoulder. No matter what happens next, he said, thank you for choosing yourself. I looked up at him. And thank you for never asking me to become someone else. Later that night, as we sat under a blanket with the windows cracked open to let in the autumn air, he asked me something. Not a proposal, just a whisper. If I stayed still long enough, would you come find me in every life? I smiled into the quiet. I already did. I never sent out an announcement. There was no post, no picture-perfect moment in a white dress under cherry blossoms. But I did get married. Not with vows and diamonds, but with quiet decisions. With choosing mornings that started in peace, and nights that ended without fear. Jonathan's wedding happened in a garden with rose arches and polite applause. He posted one photo, then another. I didn't double tap, didn't zoom in, didn't wonder, because by then I had already given my last goodbye. Not to him, but to the girl I used to be, the one who waited for love like a package stuck in customs. She deserved more, so I gave it to her. Ethan never asked me to move in. Just happened. One morning my brush was still on his desk, my earrings on his windowsill, and my tea mug in his sink. We didn't talk about labels. We didn't need to. One evening, while watching a documentary on snowfall patterns in northern Japan, he leaned over and said, "You know, if we ever did get married, I'd want it to be on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. Just us and a two-person jazz band." I laughed. "Only if I can wear boots with my dress." Deal. It wasn't a proposal, but it was a promise. Sometime later, I visited an old temple with a friend. They handed me a slip of parchment and told me to write a wish. Instead, I wrote a thank you, then tied it to the prayer rack and walked away without looking back. Because sometimes the miracle isn't what changes, it's what you finally learn to leave behind.